And think of the fact that he was 15 at the time. And think of the fact that information was known to our government. And think, and I think about it, where was the compassion? Where was the humanity that in a place so sacred as a hospital, abuses such as that would take place? How do we distinguish ourselves from the human to the human? And yet, no voices were raised. And other types of models that took place in Bagram would be to leave him in interrogation rooms for extended periods of time so that he would urinate on himself. And of course, because he can't hold his bowels together, he'd be mocked and laughed at. And then the big guys, the big soldiers, would simply use his head as a mop. And I particularly like one of the stories that Omar tells about a soldier who seemed to have problems with flatulation, because he'd keep coming up to Omar's bed, sticking his bum in his face, and farting, as we say in Scots. And while that was going on, and it was constant, nurses, doctors, soldiers, all giggled and laughed. Wasn't that cute? And when I asked Omar about, well, what happens when you leave here and you were going to Guantanamo, Omar said, well, you know, Dennis, they didn't feed us for 3 days. And they didn't give us water until our sips of water only a day and a half before going on that plane. And the reason was because they didn't want these detainees to use the toilet facilities on the plane. Now think if you had a neighbor who had a dog who wasn't fed and was treated that way. It wouldn't be long before you'd be calling someone for help. And that gives you a very good glimpse of how Muslims were looked at in Guantanamo. And I say Muslims because no American goes to Guantanamo. In fact, today, there are no Westerners in Guantanamo. Britain, France, Germany, all protested about their detainees being there. Adults, each and every one of them, and they went home. We have been silent. We've been silent about Omar Khadr, and we've been silent about that hellish place called Guantanamo Bay. And so as I could go on forever about the massive abuses against Omar. So let me just take this last few minutes to tell you a bit about Omar. I always anticipate the smirks and the grins when I say this. Omar Khadr is just a lovely young man. I have never heard him say a bad word about anybody. I feel in awe of him. I think he would be a wonderful example of Canadian citizenship. Think about that. And yet, just recently, as I go off on a tangent here, and the CBC did a documentary. And more I'm hearing these talking heads, people I don't know, whom I haven't seen in 6 years, talking about rehabilitating Omar Khadr when he comes back. And the last one I watched just recently on CBC talked about him being in some forensic unit, talked about what he needs when he gets back here. And the talk is all about Omar Khadr as if he's some extreme, brainwashed Taliban, Al-Qaeda fighter. That's not what Omar Khadr is. Omar Khadr is no different than those young men you saw fooling around in these videos. What he is, he's a sad, I'm not sure how destroyed young man who's learned that authority figures, if you don't listen to them, you get punished. What Omar Khadr needs, should he ever get home, is love, compassion, peace, and help to come to terms with humanity. Thank you very much.